Take a look back to the start of Battlefield 5's life. Did you expect us to be in this state at this stage of the game's development? Did you expect the move from an established DLC system to the live service to be better? Did you think it was going to be a success? I have to be honest, I was slightly skeptical about the move to a live service, but I did see its potential. Now, one thing that people do need to realise is if Battlefield 5 was based on a DLC cycle, I don't think anything could be better or would be better, because the problems we're seeing are down to a lack of resources and a lack of time, and just because you're paying for content doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be there. I think the game would still be in a similar state. I realised though that the gaming landscape was changing, and games as a service is something that we are going to be seeing a lot more into the future. DICE wanted to give us a base game and then regularly update it with additional maps, weapons, vehicles, assignments, and of course, arguably the most important thing, bug fixes. This has been the case, but only to some extent. We have been drip-fed mediocre content and been subject to several patches that took the game in completely the wrong direction. DICE have been slow to add maps, and many believe it's because they are trying to stockpile a bit of content and drop it all together with the Pacific that comes in Chapter 5. That being said, I can't believe they'd consider jeopardising the game's performance just in order to look good in the future. It'll make no sense if their content is being dropped and no one is playing the game. Take a look at all the stuff we are yet to receive in the current chapter. Many weapons, both from the assault support and recon classes, and then an all-class well-rod weapon, maps, 5v5 mode that has since been cancelled, self-propelled guns, and then of course tank body customization, which many think has also been cancelled. There's a lot of stuff in this game that was supposed to be coming in Chapter 4 and has been significantly delayed and consistently delayed. Every single thing has almost been predicted by the community. We know things are going to be dropped and delayed, and that's just a big issue. Even with the recent Gamescom event, you can see that Westy, the game changer of the year and the guy that is probably the most positive person you'll see in the Battlefield community, said that he was disappointed by what he played, and it's time to drink his sadness away. A bit of drama there, I suppose, but it is true. The stuff that they saw at Gamescom wasn't exactly groundbreaking. It was stuff we already knew we were going to get, and there wasn't a whole lot there to get your teeth into. I didn't go, unfortunately, but if you're going to miss one, it's probably the best one to miss, because there wasn't that much content for people to see. We have seen some significant content since the release of BF5. Whilst the Battle Royale mode Firestorm wasn't exactly what I had hoped for, it was a nice bit of content and certainly took a lot of resources to create, with Criterion coming in to fill that gap. We've seen a few nice maps, vehicles and weapons, whilst new modes have entered the game for the first time. It's not enough though, and this is being reflected in recent reviews. Recently, Game Informer magazine brought out a review that was pretty damning of Battlefield's attempt at a live service. You've probably seen this around on Reddit, Twitter, or maybe on other Battlefield YouTubers' channels, and essentially it's just saying that Battlefield 5 doesn't have enough in the game. There are too many bugs. A lot of the content that dropped was just lackluster and didn't hit the spot for the fans, and why DICE still doesn't have a playtest environment, as we know a CTE is beyond them. Now, I know there are reasons why we don't have it in Battlefield 5, but it doesn't really matter. It's something that should have been thought about before the game came out, because clearly Battlefield requires that. The previous games did, and there was no reason why Battlefield 5 would be any different. Battlefield 5 has new maps, and the Pacific Theatre is coming soon, but it may be too little too late given the game's standing in the community. Now, people on Reddit seem to agree with this. Some even thought it was quite generous, as Game Informer magazine offered a D rating, almost like a grade for the studio and the game. And to be honest, I have to agree. There's a good game in there somewhere, but we have to stop viewing the game on what it could potentially be and start actually standing there and saying, this is what we have right now, this is what I grade it, because otherwise things never change. So what does a good live service look like? Fortnite is probably the most obvious choice here, even though the game is going through some pretty significant changes that many don't agree with. It's massively popular and has been at the top of the pile for quite some time. regular new content on a free-to-play with fixes, tweaks, balance patches and new challenges. As I said, it's not perfect, but over the past few years they've clearly found a setup that works, and many have tried to emulate that, with Apex probably being the next in line. The thing is, a live service doesn't have to be free from paid DLC or microtransactions, so often you will see a paid game with a live service with microtransactions in it, almost equaling the same amount of money or more that we've previously paid for a premium package. This makes everything quite difficult to balance in terms of how you earn money and keep your audience content and happy. How do you go about this? I think Battlefield is one of those games that we should always be paying for. It should never be a free-to-play, apart from the Battle Royale that maybe could have benefited being in line with everything else in its own genre and maybe even being a separate game aside from Battlefield. But the main Battlefield titles should be paid. DLC is probably the way forward, I think, because it's what has worked in the past, and to be honest, we were almost receiving a live service with Battlefield 1 anyway, with regular updates to fix the game. In an ideal world, the game would release in perfect condition, with no major bugs, content planned, and everything kind of ahead of schedule, so there's always room to breathe for the developers if something goes wrong. That's not the case with BF5, and hopefully the next game isn't being rushed. And if it is, then, well, that's 2 in a row that won't have worked. The creative direction of the game and the franchise has me worried, and I've been scratching my head recently after reading some comments made by a DICE developer on Twitter. Now I have to say that the devs do have it tough. They don't need to be on Twitter trying to put out fires because, in my opinion, they probably make them worse. We've got a conflict of interests here. We've got lots of people who are trying to put their own stamp on the game, maybe trying to gain some popularity on Twitter, and whilst I'm fine with all that, that's what everybody does, I feel as if speaking on behalf of the company and behalf of DICE often gives the wrong impression, when in fact they are just giving their own opinion. That, though, isn't always the way people see it. Now, Nicholas Ostrand, he's very useful on Twitter. He does give a lot of good answers and an interesting insight into Battlefield. He's also a map designer who created some of my favourite maps in Battlefield 4, so clearly a very skilled individual. Some of his comments, though, are a little bit odd, and as you can see from this Reddit post that was around a week ago now, Uniform Enthusiast posted, "It's rather sad DICE is still hellbent stubborn on its messy creative directions. Character outfits and iconic locations does not affect how you play, they are simply art design. It's possible to make an authentic Battlefield with authentic graphics, gunplay, cosmetics and maps without sacrificing fun." And again, this links into many arguments we've seen about realism and authenticity over gameplay and fun. You've got to have the right balance, you have to strike the right chord between the two. Now this came from Nicholas posting on Twitter saying that realism isn't everywhere. Gun behaviour, vehicle behaviour, world visuals, yes. How you play, no. Now straight away that's contentious, doesn't really make too much sense, because what is realism really in a game? The vehicles aren't that realistic. The visuals of the game are oversaturated and quite cartoony. There's not that Battlefield 1 sense of grit and realism in Battlefield 5. When Battlefield 5 was said to be the most authentic Battlefield ever, many people took that as it's going to be like Saving Private Ryan. It's going to be a Hollywood Battlefield World War II experience. Everyone's going to be enjoying the battles they know with characters that they are familiar with and factions that they can really get on board with. It should be a Battlefield World War II experience that blasts everything that we've seen in the past out of the water and builds on Battlefield 1. Now Nicholas combats this saying, well, you shouldn't have really expected that, with the world visually being authentic, the gunplay being authentic, the character outfits and locations not being authentic. Now I find that quite ridiculous, because surely the outfits and locations are the most important thing for authenticity. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. Now Battlefield 5 has brought about a complete lack of trust between developers, DICE in general, and the community, and we have two community managers that I often see trying to put out fires on Reddit and Twitter in the form of Jeff Braddock and Part Welsh, or Adam Freeman, both of which are fantastic at what they do, and I'm so glad that we are lucky enough to have them in our community. They take the flak for things that aren't their fault, and there is no hate directed their way, they are just doing their job. But a couple of these tweets might include things they've said, so as I said, don't direct the hate at them. They're not the ones making these decisions, they're just relaying the messages. So starting out, we have a tweet from Jan David Hassel saying that you shouldn't trust data mines and leaks, especially when they just make stuff up. And then a apt comment saying that you shouldn't even trust DICE and the roadmaps, never mind the data mines. And that is true. The amount of delayed content we've seen can be reflected in the state of the game and the opinion of the community. Again, unreleased content that we spoke about before, and a complete lack of cosmetics, weapons, gadgets, vehicles for the Tides of War challenges. A massive delay on Al Sundan for no real reason, especially coming from a layman's point of view. You're looking at Al Sundan thinking, well, I can play it on 2 modes, I can play it in the campaign, why can't I play it on Conquest? What is wrong with that map? It would be really good if DICE could communicate that in a better way and offer an apology to many people that were probably holding on for that map, with it being a big, open, classic Battlefield experience that we even tested back in EA Play. And I have to admit, there wasn't really anything wrong with that map apart from not being able to vault through windows. So whatever happened, I'm not sure. It would be nice to see some actual communication here. Now, as I said, a little message from Braddock, and this came recently. An update on additional vehicles for Chapter 4. Seriously, how can the dev team not even notice inaccuracies in their own roadmaps? And this came from a roadmap that was posted explaining that we would receive additional vehicles, as you see on screen here. Now, Braddock got in contact with this guy and said, listen, it's wrong, that shouldn't have been there, and he's trying to escalate it as best he can within the company. And as you see towards the end, he says he's sorry, and a bit of a sigh there as well. So obviously he doesn't really understand why it's there, but in my opinion, having something like that on a roadmap and then not seeing it through the amount of people that would potentially spot that through quality assurance or whatever they call it, I'm not really too sure that's a valid argument. Obviously Braddock's being genuine here, but I do feel as if it's not an excuse that many people will take on the chin and agree with. Now, a lack of communication, yep, it's a problem. That snowballs into a lack of trust from the community. And there you go, before you know it, you've got a game that no one wants to play and no one has the time to wait to be fixed. So it's just a real issue. There was a bit of a leak rolling around Reddit and social media the other day that I thought I'd bring to you because maybe it will offer you some solace for what you can expect to see in the future. Now, the team was understaffed for the past month or so. Now, I know this because of holidays in Sweden. That is completely acceptable. It happens every single year and affects many different businesses. Usually they would stockpile enough to get them through that point in time, but with Battlefield 5 being so stretched, that's why we saw basically nothing through those months. Now, this guy is saying that 4.4 will go live on the 5th of September with El Sundan Province and Lofoten Islands, a new Grand Op mission involving Mercury and Marita, with Operation Underground coming in the last week of Chapter 4, I think he means, going live on September the 12th. The Pacific Front will launch with the next chapter on September 26th. It will come with 6 new maps playable on Conquest and Breakthrough, and there will also be 3 new Grand Operations and Squad Conquest versions of the maps coming on October 3rd and 10th respectively. The new maps will be Iwo Jima, Midway, Wake Island, Attu, Tawara and Guam. An additional 2 maps are in early development and will come out at the end of the Pacific chapter, although they cannot be confirmed, or at least the names cannot be, and funding for Chapter 6 and 7 has already been allocated. Content details are in flux, but a working name, Eastern Front, Downfall, they could be 2 things that we see coming in the future. And finally, RSP is coming out before November. Again, this is a leak, this is not truth, it's not something that's come from DICE, and even if it was, you can't take that as gospel. It's something that you might not see. One bad thing he did say is that tank body customization is getting delayed indefinitely, and that's something that I could pretty much confirm as well. It's something that we should have seen, but obviously it's causing them a lot of trouble, and that's why it's not appeared. So let's leave tank customization. Stop complaining about it, maybe we're not going to see it, and if it does come, it'll be a nice surprise. Now, to finish off this video, I'm just going to talk about a few things that I think Battlefield 5 really needs, and the next game definitely needs. Another Reddit post, and I know this video's had a lot of Reddit posts, but I feel as if these videos I make do reflect what the community says quite accurately, and it's a semi-popular opinion by Lucky the Leprechaun. Nobody wants unknown battles. Now, what he says is iconic battles are what sell. They're also a lot more fun. Storming the beaches of Normandy or fighting house to house in Stalingrad is exactly what people think of when you say World War II. I agree. Now, I'm not saying that we should copy other Battlefields or copy other games or movies, but you can definitely take influence from them. You can definitely look, as this guy says, at Saving Private Ryan and think, that's what I want to see. That's what I want to play. I want a Saving Private Ryan Battlefield game. And I think everyone watching this video would say, if that was happening right now, even with bugs in the game, it would be far more popular, and you just jump on to experience it. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. It's kind of a high note to end on, I suppose, because we're talking about stuff we want to see as opposed to the things that DICE have omitted from the game. But whatever, trying to make things positive as best I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.